Get ready. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. This is Josh with the Big Slick Adventures Network, and we have another episode of our horror hangouts. And today, my guest is Alice in Gothic Land. How are you doing this evening, Alice?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thank you for having me here today.
It's wonderful to have you on there. Of course, she resides in Spain, which is why we're doing this a little earlier in the day. Um, because probably like me, she probably, as we get a little mature, I should say, we go to bed a lot earlier than we
Yes,
used to when we
yes,
were younger.
absolutely. And it's like, oh, my bedtime. I'm getting too close. Yes.
I do just as well trying to stay up till midnight on New Year's Eve anymore. So
I know the feeling, and it is getting harder, but hey, we can enjoy the rest of the day. There's more hours to go out. So, yeah. And
it,
sleeping is great fun as well, even more if you remember your dreams. So, that's great.
Oh yeah, exactly. So, why don't you tell everyone what your YouTube channel, Alice in Gotham is all about? What you
Right.
kind of deal with?
Yeah, it's you were asking me that because I asked for more or less what we were talking about because I know that you talk a lot about horror and I'm like, oh man, I've not watched this for ages, and I was really like worried at some point. But then you asked me this, and I've been ruminating on that because when you start a channel, and I think that's true, like when you start your Substack, for example, you start with an idea, and then the idea evolves because you evolve, and you just have a go, don't you? You just like, well, people tell me I just need to start somewhere. But the channel really began as a web page round about 2005, 2006, because I saw the gap in the market, and I saw a gap. I was a mature student at university doing English philology, and I realized that I couldn't find a home for the Gothic. At that time, all the web pages were like WordPress, and I was trying to find like a home outside the academia, and all I could find were like bits here and there, but nothing like a home. So I started going on this idea of Alice in Gothic Land because of my name being Alice, and people used to mock the name, oh, in Wonderland. And so the Gothic Land came from that rebellion as well. So I did some shadow work on that side. But then when I decided to open the channel, it was a little bit like to get that initial idea of the web page that never quite got developed.
Hmm.
I started and drop it, and work got in the way, kids, family. But the idea was always there. So I thought, well, let's start with Gothic literature. Let's start with the Victorian times. Let's start with these characteristics. But then I got into seminars, and I got into, picking up again, studying more about the Gothic and rereading things and realizing that the market has changed, obviously, but this still wasn't the thing that I wanted it to find. So as I'm not being very consistent because I've been trying to find really why am I in this space. And when people ask me why, how do you know you're Gothic and what is the Gothic, and I'm always in that circle. So recently I realized that really what I've been doing all this time is finding out why some of us are drawn into these spaces. Why do you like horror, Josh? So why do we go to the Gothic? Can you actually answer that question? And that took me to the rabbit hole of Jungian psychology. And that's where I am at the moment. I'm just trying to find a Gothic psychology, and I'm building up a school of thought that is something very recent that's kind of all come together now, and it's starting to make sense. But it's taking me all this time. So the channel just is trying to see, connect with like-minded people, to see, yes, exactly that. It's like a bit like the Gothic itself. It kind of is runny. It's really difficult to pin down. It's really difficult to define and describe. But it's this space where we talk about the Gothic as a tool to define and to connect with the unconscious. That's really what my channel is about, to find this psychology of the Gothic that nobody really seems to be talking about like this in the way
Mhm.
I want to talk about. I know that was a long way to answer that question, but
It's certainly not an easy answer. And of course, I first discovered you on Substack, and I saw that you had a YouTube channel. And of course, it was just a few weeks ago I had Margaret Bell on, who's a
I saw that. Yeah.
therapist whom you've had on your show. And I find it interesting to really delve in, because I'm someone also likes to kind of delve into psychology, at least in my case, why I like horror. And so listening to listening to your channel certainly helps me understand a little bit of who I am, and
Mm,
how it relates to everything. And the
that's
next question is going to be even more difficult, because I think a lot of people don't know, even I don't know how to sometimes define it. But what do you consider, how would you define the Gothic? I guess, Gothic as a term. What does
yeah.
that mean to you? Do you think?
Yeah, that's great that you say that. What does it mean to me? Because it means different things for different people, and we can look up at the academia. So
Hmm.
the Gothic was born in the UK, but it's also very much being adopted by America. And in Spain, we didn't really have a Gothic as a genre. We've had similar things, and we have what is it called now? I always forget the name. We have sorry, I with me in the name sometimes we just kind of have this relationship. I'll come with that, but it's more like magic realism, but it's actually Gothic, and there's all these people talking about what the Gothic is. And again, there's so many definitions, so many descriptions, because really is where you find everything that is uncomfortable, everything that is otherized, where we find everything we have repressed, what society doesn't like. We can go from trauma to personal monsters to mental health. It's all these plays where
Hmm.
the uncanny, the academics, again, they talk about, they use this unheimliche, this term of Freud, to describe and define what the Gothic is. And then they bring Chris Seva, and there's a lot of philosophers, psychologists that they get brought into the mixture to try to define this thing. And at the end, it's almost, for me, as the more I go into it, is this living psychological space that now is not even a genre. It started as a genre in literature, but it was also a Gothic tribe. It was a Germanic tribe. So if you start digging out back in the history, it started as a tribe. So, okay, we started as a culture. What happened to that? Why are we collecting? Why are we picking up again the Gothic? Because of the barbaric sense of the term,
Hmm.
and who they were as peoples. But then also the buildings. We go to the Romanic style, and then it started to clash with the Gothic, which was very sorry with the architecture that they started building, not the Gothic, the later Gothic with all the windows as we know
Hmm.
it, and all the, so it's kind of a term also that started with a tribe and
Right,
a
the
language.
Goths.
There's also exactly the Goths, and then there was also a language. They use their own language, and it's a dead language, a Gothic language too, which again we have lost so much about the culture, and the language is, again, there's so much that we can learn from the peoples, and also about our own history. So there are a lot of gaps in the term itself, and it depends on how you what you're concentrating on. Now, some people really just concentrate on the aesthetics, and you will say, oh, okay, so it's not the same goth and gothic either. In Spanish, it's very confusing as well, because we call everything gothic, and then goth is like the aesthetics, but then the tribe is godos. So
Hmm.
let's get it even more confusing for Spanish. So it's for me is that space where I find that I can express everything that is really, really deep in me. So just narrowing it down is, for me, it's a psychological space. And yes, it comes with the aesthetics. I mean, I love the aesthetics of it, the Victorian side. I'm not into tattoos, but that now is into goth as well. I don't like piercings, but that comes into it. And there are so many different tribes now, so many different versions.
Hmm.
And it's all like, whatever that means to you, it is this space that is, it really touches everything, which the risk of that is that it might just disappear as well. This is what the academics say. If it's everywhere, then it's nowhere. How can we describe something that is everywhere and nowhere? It's like a
Right.
horror film in this sense. It's like it connects with horror so much because it's almost horrifying, the thought of it. So in that sense, how would you live the Gothic? In your case, Josh, how would you resonate with that? That would be my interest. So that's what I would be asking people in the
Hmm.
channel directly. How do you connect with that? Because my truth is not everybody's truth, and that's when it gets really interesting. So yeah, more or less.
Well, I know, and that kind of answered my next question. As far as what attracted you uh, to to the Gothic, I guess, whatever the I don't know if I want to say lifestyle, but just the um, now I'm blanking on the word that I'm using for the culture. I guess the Gothic culture. I know with me at first, especially when I was younger, it was the aesthetics of it. Um, Particularly as I started watching horror movies, started reading books, and then I started understanding that there's a deeper meaning to the Gothic as far as why I'm actually attracted to this. And it
Right.
seems like with both with Gothic, there's the horror elements, the horrific elements, but there also seems to be like a little bit of, would I be mistaken in saying that there's even some romanticism
Oh
that's
yes.
also blended into that as well?
Yeah, yeah. There's the romantic Gothic, and yes, yes, you do have that. In fact, I'm just thinking now. One of my favorite bands is, oh, now is a solo singer, is Ville Valo.
Hmm.
uh, from the band used to be part of him, and that's dark love, and is considered very goth. And you look at his videos and what he speaks and what he talks about is this dying for love, the forever romantic love, feeling of I'm dying, this desperation. And for me, that's, it really gets somewhere really, really deep with me. This I would die for you, this Romeo and Juliet kind of story. So yeah, there's so many varieties as well, and so many different, we could say, flavors to it as well. That, no, you're not absolutely wrong. You're quite right there.
Yeah, kind of like it's just kind of like the blend of both of those together, because there is, like, when you watch, say, an old vampire movie, for example, be whatever Dracula or any of those movies from, particularly from the Hammer films, but there's always been that sense of both, I guess, romanticism in them, even, I guess you would say, sexuality even in
Yeah,
with that, and that's, of course, I think, spread into different other subgenres of horror as well. Um,
yeah. I think what happened there is that, like everything, it has evolved in time. But the first Dracula, that
mhm.
the first book, the Bram Stoker's first Dracula, wasn't anything. It was no romantic at all. It was a monster, no feelings. It was closer to the Nosferatu.
Right.
We saw the black and white film, and that was, and when you read the book, really, it's nothing like all the romantic versions. There was no romance at all, and people tend to forget that.
Mhm.
And it was described and depicted as a monster, as just carried out by his hunger, and there was nothing else. Everything else that came after, that was just adapted to the times that we were living.
Right.
So historically, this evolution, I mean, now they do all sorts of things, vampires, and we fall in love with that. But I also wonder now, are we falling now with what exactly? Is that narcissism? Because it's a very destructive relationship between the non-dead and the living.
Hmm.
And when you look at the dynamics there, it's pretty toxic, you
Well,
know.
it's interesting you say that because a friend of mine, when the last Nosferatu movie came out last year, she was quick to point out how Nosferatu, and she said this pretty bluntly, represents the awful ex boyfriend you used to have who just happens to come along into your life just as things are going well now and you've gotten past him, and here he is showing up, messing up your life again. So,
Yeah, but it's I mean, I've not seen it yet, but
mm,
I've got a friend who's a psychiatrist and he's living in Australia. He's Venezuelan, but he's living in
hmm,
Australia. And he said, Alicia, you need to watch this. It's so Jungian in the
hmm,
sense that it really talks about shadow, anima, animus, all the archetypal world of the unconscious,
hmm,
and all these dark areas. And I think there are some essays already doing a really good job about this. And I mean, I haven't had the time to see it. I would love to. But again, is if we start doing a deep psychological reading into these films and into these productions, whether they are
hmm,
books or series, we start to see actually what's going on currently in our lives in historically, so it gets more complicated. It has layers and layers. When I watch, for example, Coppola's Dracula, which was my favorite for years. I
hmm.
mean, the first time I went there, I must have been 17, 16 to the cinema with my friend, and we stayed like twice to watch it twice. What in love. We came out like, oh, we wanted Dracula in our lives. And now I watched that again. I'm horrified. You know, women are like things we treat it like we can be raped, we can be groomed, we can also now I go, oh my God, why did I like these? Things have changed. I didn't have that information then. You know what I mean? But at the time, it was, oh, this romantic love. Yes, poor guy. You know, can you not see the monster? Why did he become a monster? Because
Hmm.
he was wronged and because he was, you know, and when you have this feeling of social justice, that
Right.
neurodivergence we tend to have really, really strongly, then you empathize with the monster. You empathize with the bad guy that at one point he didn't even have feelings at the beginning, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
So yeah, more or less, if that answers the question, that's where my thinking goes.
Hmm. Yeah, I know with Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I do like that movie, but one of the reasons why it's never been my say favorite version of that story is because they did make him a sympathetic figure, and I kind of like my Dracula to be just as we see with the original Nosferatu with Bela Lugosi, with Christopher Lee, this
Yeah.
unrepentant, unredeemable, and you see this too in the newer Nosferatu, so, and I would recommend it as well, where these are just irredeemable monsters who prey upon our own feelings or emotions or our own inadequacies, I suppose, to get the better of us, so to speak. So,
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. We're going now again, you know, in the union world, that would be, you know, it would be a shadow part, a shadow side of us.
mhm,
So it's actually probably a mirror of who we really are. So this character is mirroring the person in front of him, or of it even. And it's actually the reflection of that. And we actually then, the monster is not, the monster itself is not that thing we have in front of us. If it's a reflection, we actually, maybe what we're seeing is ourselves. So it got really, really deep into your unconscious and to what is actually tapping for each of us. So when you watch that film, how does that sit with you? Where is it actually touching? You know, and how is it moving you? That's for me what is really, really interesting. What is it doing at an unconscious level?
mhm.
And then start pulling from there.
Oh yeah. Um, now, of course, earlier we mentioned Gothic psychology, and how do you think that can be used to help us, as humans in our everyday life as we, uh, as we're dealing with our own emotional, or whether it's trauma or grief. I know you and Margaret touched on this on your episode, but how do you think it can be helpful in our lives?
I think every time we find a tool to go deep in our mind, in our psyche, uh, I think that's great. So I see it as a tool for self discovery. I think it's because it's got to do with art and expression. We can take that to a workshop with people and not call it Gothic literature because people, for example, here in Spain, people don't really understand it and they go scared and they think it's something esoterical and we're going to be doing rituals. We do rituals in the sense of exploring what's going on in your psyche. So the exercise is not rituals, but well, if you want to call them rituals, they are because they kind of move things inside. Uh, but I think I've got lost now in my own talking. There we go. The neurodivergent go, foo, with so many ideas. Yes, it can help because we're going to be through a tool that is kind of in the entertainment, a book or a film, you're going to be already going in all so relaxed. You're going to be like, I just want to be entertained. I'm not in a session on therapy. In therapy, you might feel the tension, won't you? Because
Hmm.
it's like, ooh, what's the other person going to say? What is going to come out? But when you are in front of a film or you are reading a book, you kind of go all in. So we already relaxed. Our nervous system is centered, is we kind of balance, we are willing to be there from the entertainment angle. So when you are in this space and you start realizing, and this is an exercise that anybody can do while watching something or reading something, is to start with a pen and paper, pick on and write down everything that comes to mind when you feel touched and moved. And when you feel that discomfort, okay, that's work for the analyst. That's work for you to then amplify that information when you are on your own and say, why did I feel like that? It's actually about you making questions and not just watching passively, but watching something actively. So why do you keep going to Friday the 13th? Why do you keep finding a home in Racer? Why did you do this series? So ask yourself these questions, and then you're gonna find that maybe it's a memory from childhood, is connected to a day out with your cousins. It might be that day that I went, a smell comes to you. Man, we're doing a lot of under, psychic work, so not psychic, but psychological work where you're starting to peel out and know more about yourself, all those areas that were kind of buried, or you were just like, yeah, I'm just a freak. No, you just, you go into these spaces and your unconscious is saying, we need this because there's work that we need to do. So, I think it's a lot deeper. People don't realize that they may have in their hands a fantastic tool of self-development and self-awareness because it's been put in this box of, well, almost like perversion, mainly
Hmm.
in horror, because it's more like sometimes it can be connected or compared to porn if it's badly and a lot of a slash and a lot of blood coming out and there's no story. You might go, oh, okay. But why am I attracted to that? Why does it move me? What do I feel like yourself, as a writer? Why are you replicating certain things from certain productions? Is that coming through your writing? Is it not? Why is that and not something else? And these asking yourself questions, I think, is where we find all the information that we need to yeah, self-development and what Jung will call individuation.
Hmm.
So I think it's a tool that has been missed out in the Jungian world. They look a lot into fairy tales and in myth. And I'm thinking, why don't they look in the Gothic? this all the monsters are there, shadow work and the Gothic are like very good friends, So it's for me is that creating that awareness that when you're watching something that I might have said on a video, or you read one of my articles, you go, that resonates, but you might still not know why, don't know why. So then my invitation to you or anybody is, okay, keep pulling, answer the question, what is going to come out from that? And that work is fantastic because it's like dream work. You analyzing, let it sit, come back to it a few days later, and it's kind of simmering in your brain, and it has legs, and it stays, and it's fantastic. So it's therapeutical. Yeah.
But yeah, and I think too with gothic and or gothic horror, that we're attracted to. Initially, we're attracted to, like I said earlier, the aesthetics, the blood, the spookiness, and all that. But deep down, there's a lot more layers going on in that reading this or watching this is forcing us to confront our own
Yeah,
fears, our own insecurities, and through the characters um, we are following, there we're kind of like following them on a journey together, almost in confronting those very fears and so forth.
absolutely. Yes.
So I guess my next question, this could be a two-part question, I guess. What would you, as far as Gothic literature goes,
Mhm.
what's a really good example of that? And do you have a favorite, like a Gothic book that you enjoy reading or have read in the past?
Yeah, I keep always going back to Wuthering Heights, which is something that some people may not consider Gothic because they think it's more like a romantic story. If you're not into the Gothic space, you wouldn't consider that Gothic. At least here in Spain, people will go, well, that's a romantic story, it's Gothic.
Hmm.
Um, and that's, if I have to think of an evergreen book that for me always gets me, is that Wuthering Heights. Dracula too, but
Hmm.
I've been more in contact with Wuthering Heights for essays and when I was at uni and then later on, because for me it has all the elements, and it's got, we could say it hasn't got the horror side. It's more the ghostly, is the horror side is when we have more like in Dracula, you have the blood, you have the
Hmm.
physical, it's more visceral. Then that's where we have more the bodily is more connected to the horror. But when you have more the psychological and whatever your imagination is doing there, that's pretty much in the Gothic sphere. And then we have the as I said, the ghostly with Catherine, and then all the story, and all the wind and the descriptions. It's very subtle when the descriptions of the weather and the location. That for me is, it has all the elements. So every time that I come across a novel that describes with the descriptions the landscapes and the feeling so well, that's the Gothic there for me. So that for me would be like the evergreen Gothic novel. But there are many. I mean, and as you grow older and there are new writers coming out. I mean, I really do love nowadays like Tracy Fahey, who's also a friend of mine. She's an Irish writer, and now she's been receiving an award, and she's got that folkloric, ghostly, eerie sound and touch in her stories, even though sometimes they can be quite visual as well. So she may be touching on some horror, slightly to bodily horror and female horror, but it's more into the
Hmm.
this Gothic space. So we have now new writers that are really doing a great job of that, and it's in our current times talking about current problems through this lens, and I think it's beautiful and it's very much needed as well.
Yes, I agree. That's a good pick there. I never really thought of Wuthering Heights, but looking back, and I haven't read that in 30 years, maybe 35 years, probably when I was in high school. So, uh,
That's an invitation for you to retake that and see what you think.
okay. Uh, Now here's the next part there. What would you consider some good examples of Gothic horror movies,
Mm.
and what are some of your favorites?
I do love Sleepy Hollow. I wouldn't say, well, yeah, I guess there's the horror aspect there because of all the decapitations
Mm-hmm.
and the witchery, and visually, as a mom, when I watched it first as a, before kids, and I was like, yeah, this is fun. Some heads being chopped off. But then having kids and then watching it again, there's that moment where we get the night the horse. I was the name the guy in the yeah
the
the guy
the
there.
headless horseman.
Exactly, the horseman. Thank you. And you have in there going after the family and killing mom, dad, and child.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's something else. When you have kids, it's
Right.
like, oh, no, no, I can't go there anymore. But before it was like, yeah, get everybody. And so for me, that's a really good example. And it's an American story, and it's a very short story, and it was adapted by Tim Burton, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And the original doesn't quite go like that, and I think it's quite short, and the characters don't play the same roles as in the film. But for me, I mean, I love Johnny Depp as well. I just
Right.
love the actor. And I mean, but even in cartoons, if you watch for me, the Beauty and the Beast, that's so gothic.
Mm-hmm.
Gothic castle. We have the Curse of the Flower, the life of the beast, as in impersonating this monster that is actually the shadow part. And we have also archetypal the animanimus again. It's kind of terrific and terrible, and not terrific. It's terrific as well because it's great, but it's terrible. This curse. And even though if you think of the cartoon version, the Disney film,
Mm-hmm.
uh, for me, it's more horrifying the character of Gaston.
Right. Right. Oh yeah.
Because he's terrible. He wants, and he gets really aggressive. Okay, so even in cartoons, you can find all these characteristics, and we might be missing it out. We always in horror, we connect, oh, Friday 13th, Halloween, blah, blah, blah. Now, hang on. We can find elements in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of places, and that's great. I mean, as a child, if we go back to the 80s, because I know you love the 80s,
Right.
um, I really enjoyed Friday the 13th. I really liked it at the time. And I loved Hellraiser. I wasn't sure. And then I started, I couldn't stop. And
I
for
can
me, that was
imagine.
a surprise. Exactly. I saw your t shirt there. So that was kind of a surprise, but there was a story as well. And nowadays, my favorite is Supernatural, the series. And
Okay.
I mean, I've got now, I can say I'm quite proud to announce that I do have an essay, an academic essay that's coming out soon in a collection of women in supernatural. It's a critical essay collection. And that for me, I don't know how familiarized you are and if you are one of the fans, but Supernatural for 20 years is done something unbelievable in the horror space, I think, in my opinion. And it has gothic elements too. So we have the combo there. Because yeah, we have the monsters, we have the blood, we have the
Right.
characters, the metamorphosis, we have possessions, we have leviathans eating people, and we have all the elements and the gothic. So for me, that's such a great example, and
Mhm.
modern, and still going on because of fan fiction. It's just
Right.
a family, and what happens in the conventions and how the connection with the actors. That's something that is great in this horror. I know
Mm-hmm.
you guys call it science fiction in the States, but it's actually horror. And the English call it horror, and then they do have books with the gothic elements in Supernatural. There's a book about that. So I mean, it stretches so much that it starts embracing a lot of characteristics as well. So I don't know if I did answer that, and I gave you a lot more
I
answers to
think
all.
you answered it just fine. I've actually never seen Supernatural. Um,
Oh,
I'm
I've got
normally not a big
the
TV.
background.
I'm not really a big TV series watcher anymore. I have
Oh, okay.
because you have to watch one, then you gotta watch all of them. Where with a movie, okay, it's 90 minutes, boom,
Yeah.
watch it onto the other. But maybe I'll. That's not to say I won't give it a try at some point. Now that you've talked it up pretty well,
I think
it's
you will
interesting you said
like
Sleepy
it.
Hollow because I just watched that this past weekend because I always watch it about this time of
Yeah.
year. I like to watch it, and I remember seeing that in the theaters. And God, even when I first watched it, and I hadn't had kids at that time, I was horrified by that scene where he slaughters the family there. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm also the oldest of three, so I kind of remember when my siblings were that young too. So maybe that's how it hit me. But
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, when you become a parent, things kind of change.
well, yeah, and thing too about Sleepy Hollow, they of course also had a Disney animated short
Yeah.
years ago. I think probably came out in the 1960s. Called I think it was just called Ichabod and the Headless Horseman. But that's
Oh,
always like a good way to. That's a good way to bring kids into the gothic, something like that. And like you said, even with Beauty and the Beast is another great example of a good
yeah.
gateway um, watch to get younger people into the gothic.
I think kids naturally like spooky things. In
Mm-hmm.
general, some of them are scared. But if you watch Casper, the Friendly Ghost, come
Mm-hmm.
on, you have ghosts there. And if you go back to the film that they made later, I thought that was great. I love that.
Right.
I mean, I just love Casper. And it's again the ghostly and who is actually the evil person, the human, not the ghost.
Right.
So what does that say about us humans? Um,
Well, and that's something that was surprising me. Like mentioned, Hellraiser
yeah,
is particularly in the first movie, the Cenobites, these demons. Yeah, they're
mhm,
not exactly good guys, but they're really not the main villains either. It's really a couple of the human characters of Julia and Frank, and the Cenobites are just either a reflection of our own
yeah,
evil within us
yeah,
and represent the consequences of our actions. Basically, they're just there to be judge, jury, and executioners for the most part. So,
yeah. I think I would have to go back to that because I think this story with the box, I think the symbology behind that is great. And I wouldn't be doing it justice right now because I will need to refresh that. But I think thinking back and remembering myself when I first watched that,
mm-hmm,
and the thing that really got my attention was the dynamics of this box and why this man was manipulating this box. And it was like the box of all evil that came out there. And it was actually what came out of there was a reflection of what was going within. So, if how old were we when we watched that? Probably in our 20s or earlier
I
than
was
that.
14 when I saw it first.
So yeah, I think in Spain things arrived a lot later, but I think I must have watched that when I was 18 and or engaged with it then. And then I thought, ooh, there's something really deep. There's a deep story, and I didn't have a clue about the Gothic, about Jung, about nothing.
Mm-hmm,
But it already touched something in me, and I think that's so interesting to analyze what was that was pure in the sense of what I felt there or you felt there at that time.
mm-hmm.
What was it? Again, it's a material for you to analyze. Has it stayed there? Has it evolved? How does that talk to you now? I think that's beautiful. It's just that's what I find the beauty of it all.
Well, some of the great writers, and Clive Barker being one of them, typically do a good job. And I think Mary Shelley did this way back when she wrote Frankenstein. It those stories, even though they seem like they're different, whether it's Barker's Hellbound Heart or Shelley's Frankenstein or any Edgar Allan Poe
Yeah,
story, often do put a big reflection mirror on society because
yeah,
it's normally the humans that are the real monsters more times than not.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think that maybe. that job is what has been missed out and still been missing out. There's still something happening there that it doesn't matter how many academics we get analyzing it. I have this theory that even academics haven't really looked within enough to work that out. And I think this they need that work to get there.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say, the work that you're doing so far, both on your Substack page and on the YouTube channel, I think is shedding a lot of light
Oh,
uh, to that subject, a flickering light in the darkness, so to speak, there,
yeah,
but
I love that.
showing people the way through the darkness, I think, by holding up that little flashlight there.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. It's nice that you see it that way because that's the actually the what's happening. At least that's how I see it. But it's great to see how people connect or otherwise with what I'm trying to say and see how it moves you all. So having that feedback is for me is great. So I appreciate that.
yeah. Oh, not a problem. Certainly is. I mean, because I don't think, like you said, I don't think there's anybody in the YouTube space that I'm aware of that is tackling these subjects in the way you are, and because combination that Gothic does blend into the horror genre is one of the
Mm,
reasons I wanted to have you on in the first place. So I'm glad we were able to make this happen. And fortunately, I had a few days off. I'm like, good, we can do it on this day there. So, but yes, Alice, thanks for coming on the show.
thank
And for those of you that watch her YouTube channel, I have in the show notes in the comments below, so you can check her channel out and and certainly subscribe to hers as well. So,
thank you.
um, I guess one last thing there. Of course, it's about to be Halloween tomorrow. Is there any special, different traditions? How is Halloween celebrated in Spain? I have an idea that might be different than the way we
Yeah.
do it here in the United States.
Yeah, I was actually complaining this afternoon about that because we're so boring. I mean, I've seen the images that somewhere on, I think it was on Instagram that I saw some pictures of some really fantastic home decorations,
Hmm.
like the English do in the home for Christmas, but Halloween style. I'm just like, oh, so jealous because here we're really boring. We are really that you have to think that in Spain we had a dictatorship for many years,
Hmm.
and that didn't allow us really to celebrate much. And
Right.
what we actually do in Spain in general is we celebrate all days saints. So that would be the 1st of November.
Right.
And we do on the 31st at night, we do meet with families. And the tradition is really to eat chestnuts and some little cakes that we make with potato and sweet potato and some nuts on them, and they're very very sweet. But it's very dark and very, that's in Catalonia as well. In Catalonia we do the sweet things, and in the south I think they may have different celebrations as well. But it's basically a religious day from the 31st to the 1st. People go to the cemeteries to put flowers to the deceased members and to honor them just to memory. But
Hmm.
nothing like, I mean, the food element is there. So I guess that maybe at some point we did lose, probably the Celts, because we are Celtiberians or Celts and Iberians, or the combination. Uh, so we still have these traditional, uh, venerating the deceased with food and to keep them happy for the whole harvest next year. I think at the core that's why we do this. But the
Hmm.
sad thing is that people don't know why we celebrate things anymore. It's not spoken enough in the school. The kids walk out with, we do have the image of an old lady roasting the chestnuts in the street, really cold, really poor, with broken clothes, and that's the image of we celebrate. In fact, we call it the chestnut celebration. So it's like castañada in Catalonia. So there's this idea. So nothing like what you guys have over there. And I'm so flipping jealous, because I would love it to be like that. The most that I see is my own home being decorated. But it's true that the kids do trick or treating because we have imported that from you guys. But the Spanish tradition is absolutely very boring. I'm
Yeah.
afraid.
Not quite. Yeah. I guess like in England, they over the years have adopted,
Yeah,
from my understand from some of the people I've watched and people I follow that live in the UK, they've kind of adapted a more North American, because I think Canada pretty much celebrates much the way we do here. You'll just have to come out here on October 31st somewhere in the
I
United
think
States
I
and
have to.
just like rent out a house in a old neighborhood, particularly in the northeast part of the country or somewhere, and just sit back and observe all the traditions that are being celebrated.
Yeah, I would love to, at some point, now that I have more and more friends in the States, I think, and from different areas as well, I'd be like, okay, let's just take some vacation, and this year let's visit so and so, and then Halloween time.
Yeah, I'm not all that far from where Margaret is. I think
Right.
we're probably about a 6 or 7 hour drive from
Oh,
one
that's
another,
not so
because
bad
I'm
because
in
it's,
the
it's so
very
big. And yeah,
because she's in Colorado and I'm in the north part of Texas, and that sounds far away, but where I'm at, it really isn't. So it's like,
like a straight line there, and it's more the length than, yeah, yeah.
right.
So
Well,
amazing.
once again, thanks for coming on the show, and I hope everyone that watches subscribes to Alice's channel, and please give me a like and subscribe. And we will see you next time. Have a good evening and happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.